Hello and welcome back to the Transfer Flow. And on today's episode, we're talking Tottenham's big win over Manchester City and what Thomas Frank is changing in North London. Then we look at the Nuno and Marinakis drama at Nottingham Forest. We discuss who Crystal Palace could spend the Eberechi Eze money on and the early returns at Real Madrid. What's promising and what's worrying? That's all on today's episode of the Transfer Flow. We are back for another Monday edition of the Transfer Flow podcast. And look, Neel Scheller, you have been holding it down in my absence. Thank you so much. And it's good to have you back to look at the second round of Premier League fixtures and take a little bit of a tour around Europe.
It's great to be back with you once again, but I can't take all the credit. We have to give a lot of credit to Hayden. In fact, he might even be angling for your job because he was doing everything in one take.
You
So if you need, yeah, I'm totally serious. If you need a second take for the intro today, we're putting you on fraud watch.
Oh my
So
God.
no pressure.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, look, I'll just have to go on holiday again. oh no.
Mysteriously backed it up in a...
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, today we've got some interesting stories already emerging. Obviously, it's extremely early days in the season, but we've got some transfers coming up today. But first, we wanted to start off with Tottenham Hotspur, who had, I guess, the surprise result of the weekend, except that you were like, Spurs away at City, managed by the former Brentford coach as well, who also, like, it's like double bogey here for Manchester City. And Spurs, so far this season, have scored 5, conceded 0, winning away at Manchester City. And honestly, like, for those of us who've not been very convinced by the City rebuild, and I think who didn't get sucked into the Tijjani Reijnders kind of loving after City beat relegation candidates Wolves last week, they were like, "Oh my God, look at this player! He's so incredible!" And I was like, "Let's pump the brakes and see how this works against a real team." And it did not go well. What was your impression watching the match, Neel?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as you say, many of our questions about City were kind of reinforced here. I think, as you say, Spurs is interesting, but if we just want to quickly talk about City, one, the goalkeeper, I don't need to say much about that, but like we said, Trafford's ball playing is question. I think I will say his long balls are actually good. We saw not the assist, but like the pre-assist against Wolves or whatever. His like long distribution is good, but like against Wolves, I noticed like those guys were actively avoiding him in the build-up. Against Spurs, they were pressing from goal kicks. You couldn't do that, and that cost you. His sweeping in this game also was concerning, and then, to say the least, and then I mean, like Cherki, Reijnders midfield, we've spoken about how out of possession we have questions, which I still do, which still stand. But also in this kind of a game, like even in possession, it wasn't really working. Because when Spurs started to press like fully high, fully player oriented, with Van de Ven chasing Cherki wherever and Romero chasing Holland wherever and all that, like those guys couldn't even escape. And like their only idea was to try and get Marmoush in behind, which kind of happened a couple times.
Yeah.
But that was it. Like in this kind of a game, you maybe even you could put Reijnders at number 10 and get like an actual good passing from deep build up defensive midfielder. Or you want to put someone like Bernardo Silva at number 10 who will like drift around, roam around, make himself available a bit more and try and get on the turn. Because Cherki was really kept quiet by Van de Ven being on his back the whole time. And then, yeah, obviously, Ait Nouri getting injured was not ideal for City. I think that took away a lot of that kind of momentum as well. But yeah, on the whole, like, I guess just questions reinforced. I mean, even at right, I said this in my season preview as well. I don't know what they're doing at right back. Like, are you really going for the whole season with Rico Lewis as like
God.
a title challenging team? Sure, man.
Yeah, I said to somebody, like, there's one person in the world who thinks that Rico Lewis is good enough to be Manchester City's starting right back, and that guy is the Manchester City manager. Like,
Somehow.
unfortunately, but what you're saying is interesting there because watching the game, all I thought was like Trafford's long balls in this game were not good, but it's obviously that short pass which gets all the headlines. But Spurs were jumping so aggressively when City had the ball, and in the past that would happen, and Ederson would just start playing midfield. Like he would just start doing Pirlo stuff. And I started thinking as I was watching it, I was like, oh, you know what? This reminds me of that 4-0 win against Newcastle earlier in the year. Like Newcastle kind of went man for man. And I remember on that first goal, it was 0-0, and Fabian Schär chases Foden halfway up the pitch, and then you have Marmoush making a run off Trippier in behind, ball over the top from Ederson, and they go 1-0 up. And that in this game, you just thought, well, that was kind of,
that's the blueprint.
In theory, should have been the plan. Like, that would have been the way it could have worked. And yet, just not having that pinpoint passing. Oh, but don't worry, guys, because we've got Donnarumma potentially arriving as well. Like I just don't understand. They are for City. This is going to feel like having one fewer player on the pitch when they've got the ball. I think, and that, which is not like to really criticize Trafford or Donnarumma, but more to praise what they've had from Ederson for such a long time.
Yeah, and also I think it's fair to say Trafford and Donnarumma are not the best ball players. They're among the worst ball players among goalkeepers at the top level. So yeah, look, I don't know. I mean, they want more shot stopping, so they want to have less possession. I don't know what they want to counter. Like as you say, like that. Even as I was writing my season preview, like that Newcastle game was one of the ones in my mind because I thought, yeah, that's the blueprint for games in which teams press high. Because now you do have Marmoush, you have someone like Cherki who'll drop back and pull defenses kind of away if they're trying to man mark you, and then you have this guy like Marmoush and of course Holland who can run in behind, who can create space, attack space. You got to exploit that. But no, we're going to pass it directly into the guy who's pressing us. That'll do it. And then that's when you can use the shot stopping. So fair enough, actually. It does make sense.
I guess that.
But if he made a save, that was the tactic.
Something for the highlight reel, exactly. Something for the sizzle reel. But it was interesting that we had to talk about City here, though, because it's impossible to separate Spurs doing well here from City not doing that well, because as much as Spurs, I thought it's great that they've won their first two games, and one of them they won with 66% of the ball, and one of them they won with 39% of the ball. And I was like, this is exactly the Thomas Frank selling point, right? Which is like, we're going to be comfortable. But their comfort in this game was still shocking to see. Like, I mean, City had like one meaningful chance after going 2 goals down. And as you pointed out on Twitter, actually, they were outshot in the second half. They were outshot 8-5 by Spurs in the second half. And so it was just kind of like, I don't really know. Like on XG, it's obviously close, but I don't really know what the plan was here. Because in the past, if you got a lead against Manchester City, then there was a sensation of unbearable pressure that would slowly build. And over the last couple of years, that really has gone away. And in this game, I was like, Spurs don't look worried at all. And I mean this in the nicest possible way, but the Spurs 11 is not like world-class players all over it. I think like there are a couple of guys in this 11 that I do not love that much. But even when City have Rodri on and Spurs have like Odegaard, then it still just felt like it was very easy for them to relieve pressure, get up the pitch, maybe create a shot of their own.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to contrast this game with the Super Cup, which obviously not, as seriously taken maybe, but the kind of pressure PSG built, and I think Spurs did defend well in that game as well for the most part until like the last 10 or so minutes. But PSG, they consistently, kept up the pressure, kept probing, kept knocking at the door until the last 10 minutes. And then they obviously broke through. Like it didn't look like City had any of that in them at any point. And then, you do stuff like you take Cherki off when you're facing a low block, but you keep him on for a high press. I'm like, what's are you actively trying to make life more difficult for yourself? Like, what's the plan here? But yeah, like from Spurs' point of view, I think from the first 3 games, the most interesting thing for me, as you kind of alluded to, has been their lead management. So against PSG, like I said, obviously they sunk back, did pretty well until the last 10 minutes, and I think even Luis Enrique said, they were unlucky to lose that game on penalties, of course. Against Burnley, like in the end, it looks comfortable on the like stat sheet, but after going 1-0 up, they kind of dropped back a lot in that first half. They let Burnley build a decent amount of pressure, even a couple of half chances. And then after halftime, I think obviously Thomas Frank wasn't happy and he told them, get the hell up, start pressing. They did that, but they still conceded a couple of chances. And in fact, like just before they scored the second, they could have had an equalizer. So I think, I do want to see how they continue to do against like, lower table teams who they're expected to beat after they take the lead, how they manage that. They
Hmm.
did they did they did I mean fine enough after like going multiple goals up, but after that point it wasn't convincing, and that too against Burnley, who are like one of the worst teams in the league, if not the worst. So that is like the main kind of question. But I think, yeah, when it comes to like these big games, obviously City not up to their best, but we've already started to see this kind of flexibility that Spurs have, where they can, play super high, press high, certainly out of possession, press very high or drop into a very compact block. And in possession, obviously in these games they're going to be more direct. I mean, again, it's also like injuries as well affecting how they
Mm.
play, because they're missing some key players, especially in midfield. But so far they're just like in their attacks, they're either going long and bypassing midfield or going out wide. They're avoiding kind of going through the center as much as possible, which makes sense when you have like Shua Palinia and someone else there. So that's another thing I guess you want to see more of against like lower table teams when they have more possession. But yeah, on the whole, I think, my main takeaway again, it's just a couple games, so you can't get carried away too much. But I think we're seeing good enough signs that like Thomas Frank can come in and put the floor up at a very good level
Yeah.
as we expect from him. And then we see how they build again with transfers as well. They could do with another kind of creative player probably. But even without that signing, I'm tempted to say they probably can get into certainly the European spots, top six. I think they're looking good for it, because other teams also have challenges. Newcastle obviously will have looked really bad in attack both games
Yeah,
for the
they
most
have.
part. Brighton, I mean, I'll leave you to talk about them. But like behind the top four, it looks open. I think Spurs have enough to kind of take advantage.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's certainly possible, and they're clearly trying to strengthen. I mean, it doesn't look like Nico Paz is going to happen, but Akliouche is still on the cards. Like there have been Savinho is still on the cards. Like these are excellent players. In fact, some of these players are better than their first choices. For Spurs. Like
Yeah,
I
maybe
really
even
like.
for City. Like, why the hell are you selling Sevilla? I still don't get it. But
I don't know, man. Well, apparently they don't want to, but it's like, Pep has always been kind of like, well, if somebody
yeah,
wants to
yeah.
go and we get a
But
bid, then
why,
they'll
why are
go.
you
But
making him want to go? Like, play
yeah,
him every week. He will not want to go.
yeah, that's true. And I don't know, man. Like Spurs definitely still look a couple of pieces short in
Yeah.
key positions, but there's interesting stuff. Like obviously because it's only a couple of games in, we can't speak definitively, but there are some trends in the numbers which I think are ones to keep your eye on. Like only Liverpool and Brentford have made more final third tackles than Spurs so far. That's interesting. Last season they were exceptionally bad on the dribble. Like they attempted the most dribbles in the league, but they had the lowest dribble success in the league. And when you looked at them, you were like, yeah, well, there just aren't many guys who are plus dribblers
They're
here.
sending the ball out to the wing eventually, and the guy has to beat two people.
Yeah.
And he's not even a good dribbler, so all the best to him.
Yeah, exactly. So like no wonder that like Tell, for example, didn't set the world on fire when he came in. But now they've actually got a few. They've got Odobert who could do it, they've got Tell who could do it, they've got Kudus. They've also been allowing Sa and Porro and Spence, a bunch of guys to attempt take-ons. Having a little bit they're unlikely to have such a bad season again where their dribble success rate was under 40%. But certainly when they're moving the ball forward to guys who are not just like facing double cover every single day, then they could, if they can increase their ball carrying and speed in wide areas, it feels like that's something that they lost as Son got older and older and older.
Hmm.
And so those are things that I'm kind of keeping an eye on with Spurs, because that was a sort of unique weakness last season for them. And if it can be not even a strength, but just like a part of their game that they can use, then that would be great. But yeah, really good start to the season for them. And to have gone away to City already and won, like genuinely outshot them 12-10.
Convincingly,
Like
yeah.
good stuff, man. Okay, well, shall we stay in the Premier League then? And shall we talk about Nottingham Forest, who actually on the results have also had a pretty decent start to the season. They got a draw and a win so far. They're running hot again. They're like 2.7 to 2.5 on expected goals versus expected goals against, but they've got 4 goals against 2. Some other interesting stuff there actually on the field. Before we get to the off the field stuff, they've gone to a 4-2-3-1. They've had 56% possession averaged over the first 2 games against mid-table sides. It's not like they've played Sunderland and Burnley. And Elliot Anderson as well. okay, 2 games in, but I've got an eye on him because I looked at him and I was looking through the numbers and it had Elliot Anderson completing 68 passes per 90, up from 35 last year, 10 final third entries. I was like, even over a 2 game stretch, this must be a record for a Nuno player. Just is not possible that anyone's done this for him before. But he may not be a Nuno player forever, right? Because it seems that Nuno, I guess, that is Edu the issue here? Like, obviously, Nuno seems very unhappy, and when Nuno is unhappy, then I guess Marinakis gets unhappy. When Marinakis gets unhappy, then everyone's unhappy. Do you want to kind of run through what's going on here and your take on it, Neel?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just quickly to touch on what you said first about like the on-pitch stuff. I think especially in that Brentford game, like I think Brentford were a bit surprised by just how comfortable they were in possession, and
Yeah.
that kind of ruined their game plan entirely. But even against Palace, like they had good spells, so it looks like they're evolving, which is really
Mm.
interesting. But like I said in a preview episode, their owner is Marinakis. And I mean, in this case, it's probably not his, it doesn't seem to be directly his fault for once. But we should cut that out. But, you know, apparently, obviously, reports say Edu and Nuno aren't aligned on recruitment. And I think that explains a lot actually. Because for one, again, when we did the season previews and I wasn't hot on them, one of my reasons was they just haven't made any signings. And in fact, the only signings they'd made before August were Dan Doy, who was the Ilanga replacement,
Yeah.
and 2 signings which, look, if I'm being entirely honest with everyone, the 2 signings from Botafogo were not actual signings. They were part of some financial cooking done in conjugation with Eagle Football Group. So I'm not counting them as actual signings, even though they might play. They weren't. I don't think they were signed for entirely footballing reasons. Anyway, after that, they have so Dan Doy is I think a good signing. But as I said before, I just have a little bit of a question about how well he might do in like a very kind of back to forth system where he has to like run up and down a lot and carry a lot in transition. But okay, if they're evolving to this more possession based style of play, I think very good signing. James McAtee, I'm not sure about him as a Nuno signing. He's obviously got very good like technical ability, very nice kind of in tight spaces, all of that. I'll be honest, I didn't watch a lot of him at Sheffield United, but what I've seen, I'm not sure if he's got again the full kind of physical intensity to play that back and forth style of play, which it will remain fairly demanding for midfielders, regardless of even if they become more kind of comfortable in possession. So, some questions around him. Then we have, I mean, if you just compare him to like Morgan Gibbs White, you can see the kind of differences, right? Even they're both attacking midfielders, but Gibbs White has that kind of burst. He has the intensity to cover ground quickly and really drive the team forward in transition. I don't know how much of that like McAtee can replicate. And then Douglas Luiz, okay, but
Yeah.
like one of my questions is he gonna be like, because you look at that defensive midfielders, like you look at Ibrahim Sangare, for example, he's a really strong guy holding it down in front of the center backs. Is Douglas Luiz going to be that strong in duels? I don't know. I don't think so. 40 plus million on Omari Hutchinson, whose best season has had 3 goals, I think, if I'm not wrong.
And who
All right.
has, I mean, bananas shot locations.
Yeah, he
Crazy
just
shot locations.
shoots. He just shoots. Which, I mean, to be fair, it might work at first, given how, they just shoot
Yeah.
and everything goes in. But yeah, I wouldn't pay 40 million for him.
But it's a lot of money, to invest in just like kind of backing up the front line. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously there's a chance that one of these guys explodes. Like Hutchinson could explode. McAtee certainly could explode. Kalimuendo is not going to explode, but like, and
No,
I,
actually,
oh,
of these signings, like when you take the fee and the player, I can see Kalimuendo. Like I'm willing to accept that one
I
because
liked him, whatever it was 4 years ago. And I've got no issue with paying like a reasonable fee for him. It's just that like the others are like upside signings.
yeah,
but you can't have like that many upside signings. Like some of these guys are not going to play that much, and some of these guys are going to need to play all the time. It just seemed there were the two of them, and I feel like there was somebody else. They were linked to like 4 attacking midfielders in the space of 24 hours. Like last Thursday,
Good transfer
Friday.
strategy.
Well, yeah, I don't know, man. Like, and Douglas Luiz, I was kind of like, man, the whole time that Edu was at Arsenal were linked with this guy. Edu goes to Forest, and suddenly they're like, we are getting Douglas Luiz. Like, he is arriving. I've got to tell you. So what's your so overall? I mean, what do you think that this signals? A real kind of change of approach, or do you think this is just like a depth move that they're a bit scared of getting destroyed by injuries this season? Because they were quite fortunate last year.
I mean, so Nuno, I think in his last press conference, he said, I want a goalkeeper and fullbacks, which
Mm-hmm.
I think he needs, because I mean, I spoke about the fullback depth before as well. It is dire, and
Sure.
goalkeeper as well. They got Angus Gunn, who is not great from what I've seen, and he
Mm-hmm.
is the only other goalkeeper they have in their squad. So they're one injury away from being finished in goal. And yeah, fullbacks like the guy who they were linked to. Do you remember the one guy they were linked to earlier in the window?
No, who were they
It
linked
was
to?
none other than Rico Lewis,
Oh
and
God,
that guy
no, I
is
do
not
remember that.
a Manchester City, probably not ideal for Manchester City starting fullback. He is not a Nuno fullback. Like
No.
Nuno is never playing him at fullback, so they didn't sign him in the end, which makes sense. But yeah, I don't know what they're doing. So he does need depth. He needs it at fullback. But I mean, they have what, a week? So time to
Yeah,
build
they have
into
a
its
week, and
6 fullbacks in a day.
but we basically agree with Nuno then, don't we? We're like kind of
Yeah,
team Nuno. It's interesting actually. So like obviously this was exacerbated, this whole situation with Nuno and the club, by the fact that the Palace fans held up a banner showing Marinakis with a gun to
I
Morgan
mean,
Gibbs White's
amazing
head,
timing.
which
Look,
is not ideal. But Nuno obviously said, I'm not close to Marinakis. The relationship has changed. We haven't done enough business, and then they spent like 120 mil in like 4 or 5 days. But they do still have weaknesses in these key positions. And on the one hand, is it smart to potentially antagonize Marinakis and Edu? I would say no. But on the other hand, if I were Nuno, I would think I've got a really big job to match last season. And it is smart to point out to everybody that there are major issues with the squad.
yeah.
And hopefully to put some pressure on Edu and Marinakis. And you did then get the Forest fans at Palace chanting Nuno's name. So I was kind of like, this does make a lot of sense, because you have got an uphill battle to try and do. And the fact that he's moved to 4-2-3-1, I think is quite a positive sign that he perhaps does recognize, okay, we are not going to be able to just go ahead in every single game for an entire 38 match season. It's not going to happen again. Like we're going to have to evolve. And to point out that he needs to be given the tools to do that, I think is kind of reasonable. It's just that all this relies on, well, Edu, I think, is a rational actor, but it does rely on Marinakis acting rationally. And look, I don't have personal knowledge of the man, but the jury's out on whether he's going to do that. So, and certainly if he feels he's being strong armed, he's probably not going to like it. So it just seems like, given what a great season they had last year, and actually a very solid start to the season this year, when I was extremely negative on them, I had them 14th. I just think that this is completely unnecessary drama, especially when you look at like Palace. Palace are your rivals, right? Like Palace are an upwardly mobile, ambitious mid-table side. Palace are in a situation, as we're going to come on to in a second, where they're having to completely rejig, the way that their attack runs, because it ran through a guy who's now gone. They still can lose more pieces, and they're not really, and they haven't done anything in the window. Fulham similarly have done nothing in the transfer window. So this is an opportunity for Forest to like steal a march on these guys, and instead you wonder if they're just going to sack Nuno over some nonsense in the middle of September and go out and do. There are rumors about Mourinho, which is just like too
Well, you know
horrifying
what?
for
Let's have it.
words.
Let's have it. Like Mourinho and Marinakis.
Oh my
Wow.
god.
Let's have it.
I can't
It's
imagine
just,
anywhere less like to be than Nottingham if that were to happen. Okay, well, actually, look, unless you have more to say on this, it's an evolving story. Let's put it that way. Should we talk about Palace? Because Palace have obviously got big windfall from Eberechi Eze, Eberechi Eze, I should say, and it looks like they might get two guys to cover that position, which I think would probably be the sensible move. Two guys they're currently linked to are Christos Tzolis of Club Brugge, and they also might want Yeremy Pino of Villarreal, which is also quite punchy. I mean, like these are Champions League clubs that they are trying to get players out of. Should we start with Solis? He's a little bit older, so he's an age where he could definitely have some upside, but you expect him to come in and hopefully be able to contribute right away.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, he is 23, but he's had two incredible seasons. A
Mm.
couple of seasons ago, he was at Fortuna Düsseldorf in the Zweite Bundesliga on loan from Norwich. Scored 24 goals and had 8 assists as they reached the promotion playoffs, I believe. And then, if I recall correctly, bottled a 3 goal lead in the second leg against Bochum, I want to say. And then after that, Düsseldorf, like, they had a buy option on the Norwich loan, but then they sold him on immediately to Club Brugge for like 3.5 million euros or something. And then no, sorry, I think that was the buy option. But anyway, it was like a pretty cheap deal. And then he's got 21 goals, 14 assists in all competitions for Club last season. And now they're talking of something around like 30-40 million euros range because he has a contract till 2029. The Club Brugge they've I think been like decent at moving players on lately. I want to say after the Charles de Ketelaere sale, and this window in fact has been their best selling summer. They've got about 80 plus million with Arnaud Kalimuendo to Milan,
Mm.
Maxime de Kuiper to Brighton, James Talby to Sunderland, and a few on Ferran Jutgla as well to Celta. So they're not desperate to sell anyone. I mean, in fact, they'd like to keep a few people, because they haven't been winning the league either all the
Yeah.
time. And I mean, their recruitment hasn't always been amazing. But anyway, Palace obviously are desperate because like they have a couple of kids, but they need some guys to replace as you said. So yeah, they probably have the upper hand in negotiations to Club Brugge. But if you talk about Zolis, he's an interesting profile who I think he definitely is a good player, and I would like to see him in like a top 5 league. But I'm not 100% sure if he's the right guy for Palace, and I'll explain why. So
Okay.
both at both club and Fortuna Düsseldorf, he kind of operated as a very much like an outlet. So he'd start high and wide, make runs in behind or drive inside with the ball. But like if you look through his numbers, his overall like touches and passes, like overall involvement is super low. But his
Mm.
attacking production, I mean, I give you those like goals and assist numbers, is clearly super high. So he's kind of, if I can just briefly do a bit of technical explanation, he is
Here
someone
we
we'd
go.
call a high usage rate player. So usage
Mm-hmm.
rate is borrowed from basically basketball analysis, where it's more applicable there, but basically it talks about how often a player uses their team's possessions. Where uses means either kind of like shooting or making an action that leads to the end of the possession sequence.
Yeah.
So in football, it's a bit more complicated because in basketball, you either shoot, lose the ball, or get fouled. But in football, you can do a few more things, take ons, progressive carries. It gets complicated.
But
So,
it's essentially the you're saying that Solis is the kind of guy where like ball goes in
and
and
then he does something.
ball doesn't really come out.
Exactly.
It ends the sequence.
Exactly. He ends the kind of chain of the attack quite often, especially for Fortuna Düsseldorf because he was the main guy for them.
Mm-hmm.
And also at Club Brugge, obviously he had some more support, but he was used quite a bit. And you see 24 goals, 11 assists. I think that tells you everything. So he's really good, I think, at kind of coming inside from wide, both with and without the ball. He's quite quick, makes good runs, gets into the box well, shoots pretty well with his right foot. He's when you think of a high wide winger who's fast and shoots a bit and gets a few assists as well, you think he's like an amazing dribbler, but he's not. Like
No.
he's a good quick carrier. He carries the ball quickly, very well, gets into the box. He basically runs straight with the ball and runs fast. but he's not a take on expert. Like, in fact, he has less than one take on per 90 in each of the last 2 seasons. So that's in the Zweite Bundesliga and the Belgian Pro League. But I mean, he gets shots. Like, he was 3.9 shots per 90 in Belgium and 3.5 in Germany. Again, he's much better with his right foot, but he doesn't mind shooting with his left foot. So
Mm-hmm.
he gets good volume consistently. And I like his decision making as well when he gets like in and around the box, which he does a lot. So he has over 0.2 XA per 90 in each of the last couple of seasons as well. So he's
Yeah.
pretty direct. You get the ball to him in kind of like non-settled against a not very settled defense, and he will deal damage. So that's all good.
And also
Now,
just to finish up on that, like his XAG was pretty stable in the Champions League as well, right? Like he was still kind of putting that up. So ball goes in, ball doesn't come out. Like I see that, but at least with his dribble and carrying, he doesn't tend to do stupid stuff. Like if you
yeah,
look at his dribble and carry on ball value, and we've covered him in the newsletter recently, Kim wrote
yeah,
about him, then he's not doing stupid things. He's not like giving the ball away by attempting stuff that he can't pull off. So those are positives. It's just that if you want him there, you kind of would want to pair him with a more creative centre forward,
exactly,
you know, and a really creative other guy who's playing behind the centre forward, right? If you had him
exactly.
and Sarr and Mateta, then like Mateta would be doing an awful lot there. Certainly, if you had him
Who's
with
passing the
Nketiah,
ball?
if you had him with Nketiah, then I'd be like, "There's no way. This just cannot work."
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the main question for me as well, right? Like, also, I would also say like I have a few questions about how he just fits like the Glasner 3-4-2-1 because, like I said, he
Hmm.
likes to start wide and come inside, but Glasner wants his people inside from the start. And like what I like
Sure.
about him is his out to in runs, both on and off the ball. So he's probably going to be limited in those because I don't see them doing inverting stuff with wing backs. And I'll get to, I don't think they do that. So that's one question. But yeah, the main question, like you said, is they need someone who's more creative, basically, right? Like
Mm.
you've lost Eze, who obviously had a like substantial goal output as well. But really, the main thing he did was the attack went through him. He got the ball to his feet. He carried through spaces. He dribbled. He passed, and he shot a bit. You have Sar, who, like you say, is someone who gets in behind a decent weight. Is in fact not too dissimilar to Tzolis. Actually, they're both quite direct wingers slash inside forwards, who you get the ball to
Hmm.
them and they'll go straight to goal basically. Now and then Mateta on top, like at Club Brugge, for example, Zolis played quite a bit with Ferran Jutgla, who isn't exactly like a pure number 9 kind of guy. He's someone who does drop, link up, play passes, and so that really worked nicely for him, where Jutgla would drop or even play a pass, and he'd attack the space and behind.
Hmm.
I obviously with Matata you don't see that happening much. And like best you get is a long ball flick on and him going in behind, but how often
Sure.
can you do that? So I like him as a player. I would like to see him in a top 5 league soon, but I just don't know if he's the right guy to replace as just profile wise. So that's
Hmm.
my take on it.
Okay. Well, I wonder. There obviously the rumors that they might be interested in him and Pino does seem like they're kind of they want to have different looks for different situations. Pino is a little bit younger. Like he's still just 22, which is kind of shocking because he's been around forever playing for Villarreal. Like he joined them when he was 15, I think.
Yeah,
Something like that. He is a very, very different profile. And he's not look, neither of these guys is like Eze. Um,
he's not
but
getting someone like Esa. Like,
no.
yeah, we have to
But
say that from the start. Like, there's
but
no.
Pino is going to pick up the ball in a somewhat similar zone. Like, admittedly, he's a right footer who plays on the right, but he wants to get the ball between the attack and the midfield. He's a useful progressive passer, but he also receives quite a lot of high, wide passes. Loads of creativity out of him, especially last season. Though, again, that's one of those things, isn't it, where you look at Villarreal and you think, Villarreal were really juicing the attack last season. Is this transferable at this stage? But I mean, there's stuff about him that's completely incontrovertible, right? Like he is such a hard worker off the ball, ton of defensive actions, ton of ball recoveries, and being a right foot who plays on the right is helpful too. What do you think about this? Okay, if you had him and Solis playing behind Mateta, would that work for you? I mean, how would you see him dovetailing with the other guys that Palace have got in the squad?
No, yeah, that's an interesting kind of idea as well. Yeah, that definitely puts the pieces together well. Like it kind of does change the nature of Palace's attack, but it does work where Pino is the more ball to feed guy on the right side, Zolis on the left side, the more in behind guy.
Mm.
But with Pino as well, there's also the possibility, like you say, actually, of him just being plugged into that Eze role because he does play on the left also a bit. In fact, he's been playing there
Mm.
recently over the last few games. So he can play on both sides. Like over his career, he's got like 70 odd games on the right wing and 50 odd on the left. So
Okay.
he kind of does a bit of both. He's and it's also like difficult to read through all of his numbers because of that. Because on the right wing, he kind of I feel like does some more. He's basically more involved often, and on the left side, he tends to maybe limit his involvement a bit more. Like starts wider and then drifts inside with like an overlapping left back, and does well again. He's got good creativity from like inside the half space as well. I think he's just generally a good creative player. But like it's you've kind of got to pick through those. So from what I've kind of been able to deduce from what I've seen and the numbers, like I think he isn't probably going to give you the same amount of basically carrying like you said as
Mm.
if from
Mm.
deeper. So he had less than two progressive carries per 90 over the last couple of seasons. I mean, we should also say he had a big ACL injury in 23-24, which
Mm-hmm.
kind of derailed his growth because he broke through at like 18, like you said, long ago when they won the Europa League with Emery. Like that was his kind of breakthrough into the team. And then he got some pretty regular game time, but didn't really have a fully explosive season, I want to say. And then obviously now, I mean, he did get like 10 goal involvements a couple of times, but 4 goals in 22-23 and 24-25, and 6 and 7 assists respectively. So not exactly like fully starring either.
Mm.
And he's kind of been like on that edge of like being a really good talent, but just not having that standout season where
Sure.
everyone's like, okay, this is the guy. So that's like a small question, but I think he's shown enough to be like quite excited that he can still make some steps forward. But yeah, like with that injury, I mean, even before I didn't feel like he had the biggest kind of burst to get out of like tight spaces or run past a fullback. But after that as well, that's another question where you
Yeah.
wonder if he can do as much of that as you'd like. Again, in the Premier League as well, where it's we know it's like a physically more demanding league. But yeah, like he had more XA per 90 than as a last season, and obviously, like you say, uh, Villarreal start padding the attack a bit, sure, but it's still quite an encouraging sign when you compare certainly to Zolis, who
Yeah.
you know is not creating in a way which you think you'll see like equally transferable, not just for the league but also just the style of play to Palace and the Premier League. So in that sense, I like Pino a bit more. I would be a little bit more confident with him. And he gives you options, right? Like you can put him on the left, you can keep Sar and Mateta and work with that. It wouldn't be as good as Eze, of course, but I think you can work with that. Whereas with Solis, I would just be concerned that it might just become dysfunctional a bit. Or
Mm-hmm.
as you say, you can get both of them if possible, and that's a fun attack. I think Pino, Mateta, and Solis, if you can get it all to work nicely. So yeah, I think I would be a little more happy with Pino. But if you get Pino, then I can hear out Solis.
Yeah.
But if you get just Solis, then I'm like, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because then it's like, is Adam Wharton like running this
Yeah, like
attack? Like somebody they haven't really given minutes to remain essay. Um, yeah, I see where you're coming from. Like the whole thing with selling Eze is like, look, the money's really good, but you need to turn that money into two really good attackers.
yeah,
And these, I like Pino quite a bit more than Solis as well, but it does feel a little bit like, oh, like these are two interesting bets, but maybe you could get a little bit more for this money. I don't know, like a little bit more guaranteed production, possibly, but it remains to be seen. I'm intrigued to see what. I think, as always, when a big player goes to a big club, it's so much more interesting to see what the selling club does with that money.
Yeah.
So I'm really intrigued to watch this one. I'm sure that we'll be able to review their moves maybe in the next couple of weeks. Okay. Shall we then take a little step out of the Premier League, because we spent a lot of time there today? Should we talk about Real Madrid, a little known club that Neel, you've been watching.
I've been one of the few people in the world watching them,
on illegal streams.
Yeah.
Well, they've won both their first 2 games. They've scored 4. They've conceded 0. Looks good.
Amazing. I'm sure everyone's perfectly happy. Yeah, no one's worried at all. No one's having a meltdown. All going well.
It is very funny that Trent is already out, though. Very funny that Trent was out already. But yeah, I mean, like, okay, let's look. They've played 2 pretty poor teams. Like, Osasuna were mid-table last season, but like not really. Like that was Fugazi. They were 9th, but their expected goal difference was 16th. They sucked. And then Oviedo obviously promoted. They brought in Santi Cazorla at the end of this game, and I was like, I just want to watch Santi Cazorla play. And I was like, oh my god, like, boy, you cannot walk anymore. Fair enough, because he's got like his forearm sewn onto his leg, right?
Yeah,
where he had that graft. So I was just like, you know what, Santi, the fact that you're out there is bananas. But the defense, this is undeniable. The defense at the moment is very funny. Like, it's 2 crappy teams, but they've given up 8 shots in 2 games and 0.86 expected goals against. So that is extremely funny stuff. And if the defense is good this season, because also we've got second season flick and there's a question there, then, that might be good. What are your initial thoughts, though, on Real Madrid? Because, as you say, the reviews have not been glowing. The football has not been flowing.
Wow.
Yeah, the bars. There was accidental bars, and then I just decided to roll with it at the last minute. But watching this game, I was just like, Jesus, this is kind of miserable stuff.
Peak entertainment.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think, obviously, as you said, not great teams. But this happens a lot in La Liga, where there's not great teams. So what they do is they put 11 people behind the ball, inside their own third, just outside their box. And they're like, let's stand here for 90 minutes and see how it goes. So, obviously I know, like, many Real Madrid fans on social media are already like, what the hell's going on? And, sack Xavi, maybe not sack Xavi, but close enough. But I think, obviously, we need to see more games. We need to see different kinds of games before we start getting carried away. Like, my main takeaways are, 1, we probably should see more rotation in just the lineups. It's obviously, like you said, it's funny to say Trent, they bench Trent and they bench Vinny and stuff, but I think you will just see more rotation, which is good. I think they lacked a bit of that. Well, actually, they lacked a lot of that last season. And like, Xabi Alonso looks like he is going to place a lot more emphasis on controlling games and also gaining territory. Like, in both of these games against the low blocks, they basically put everyone except the goalkeeper in the attacking third. Like, the centre backs were entering the attacking third consistently, and they were like really squeezing them. And obviously it's not the most entertaining stuff to watch, and you could also question some of their like ideas for chance creation against these low blocks, because they haven't actually scored a goal from like pure open play, because the first game was a penalty with Mbappe, and then Oviedo was all like turnover transitions, but they didn't actually break down the low block. So there's some questions there, which I accept. And it's also interesting to contrast just quickly with how Barca go about things, right? Because Barca are like, you put a low block against us, but we're gonna hammer it so hard all the time that it's just gonna break. Like, you can take a 2-goal lead against us, but we'll hammer you and we'll somehow win 3-2 at the end. And they have obviously all these weapons as well. They have Lamine Yamal's dribbling, Rafinha's runs, obviously Lewandowski in the box, Pedri's creation from deeper. Real Madrid, on the other hand, they're like, we're gonna pass the ball really, really slowly, and then you're gonna make a mistake. So, the flip side, like you say, again, it's just 2 games, 2 not great attacks at all. But the flip side is Barca will concede some goals, And Real Madrid will probably have a better defense once again, but this time an actually good defense rather than, just not as bad as Barca's defense. And so, what I'm really interested to see is how they do in more open games. Because if they can establish something like, obviously, they're not going to be in the attacking third the whole time against Villarreal, for example. But if they can establish something like this sort of control, where they're not giving up many chances for the opponents, because they have some great players as well, right? Like Chouamani in midfield in front of the centre backs, amazing. Hojson being there, amazing. Militao as well being fit, amazing. Carreras has helped like progress quite a bit the ball, and in fact, like between him, the left winger being the standard guy, be it Vini or Rodrigo, and Mbappe drifting out to the left side, they've been super left biased. So that's another thing to watch out for is how they're trying to address that. Because on the right, I mean, obviously, like the two fullbacks are very different. Where like Carvajal is someone who'll overlap just simply, and
Yeah.
Trent obviously does all his stuff. So they kind of have to figure that out, I think, a bit more. Yeah, the other thing is the whole Mbappe striker question. Because yeah, like when you compare him to Lewandowski, for example, it's two very different experiences, and they definitely did lack a box presence a fair bit, I felt. But I forgot who it was. I saw someone on social media saying, the stuff around Mbappe striker is getting like so overblown that people might actually be underrating him. I think that's fair because like the
Sure.
guy is still really good, and he
When you look at
basically
his
won those two
numbers last
games.
season, if
Yeah,
you ask
like
if you ask somebody who hadn't looked at the numbers and hadn't watched Real Madrid last season how many
like
goals they think
20
Mbappe
goals.
scored, yeah.
It's 40. Yeah, it's so like sure he isn't going to make life the most straightforward for Jabi Alonso tactically. But he's still a really, really good player, and he'll win you these kinds of games effectively, single-handedly almost. So I think what head okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, because I was listening to this in a random train in Morocco with suboptimal amount of sleep. But I think Hayden
Oh God.
at in your La Liga rebuild had suggested the idea that Real Madrid could look to sell Vinicius at some point, be it this window or later, because his contract is up and there's obviously stuff around negotiations, and you can reinvest that to kind of rebuild the attack. I actually really do like that idea now, because you get Mbappe on the left, like starting off the left with a striker, basically an upgrade on Gonzalo Garcia from the Club World Cup, and suddenly that attack does look like balanced as well, and obviously quality is not a question. So that's something for the longer term future. But yeah, for this season, what I want to see is how they do in more open games, how they kind of balance, or if they do balance the attack or remain super like left biased. Also, like they were very shot happy at soon, like quite soon in both the games. Like even in the first game, like from within like 10 minutes, Militao was shooting from 30 yards. Actually came close as well. But like I don't know what I think about this, to be honest. Because on the one hand, it is not good to take rubbish shots. On the other hand, it's better to take rubbish shots from like time to time every 5 minutes than to pass the ball for 15 minutes and do nothing.
Yeah,
And those
agreed.
rubbish shots might lead to something. And the main thing with rubbish shots is you don't want to concede a counter on the back of a rubbish shot. I think Real Madrid have enough like rest defense quality and good structure as well that they've prevented that pretty well in against these teams at least. So it's going to be interesting to see if they keep using like just spam shooting as a weapon to try and break down a low block. So that's another thing. But yeah, that's broadly it. I will. Oh yes, out of possession, we cannot say anything because none of these two teams, I think, know the concept of build up. But I want to see how they press against a competent build up team.
Well, they've had like I think 64% and 70% possession in these two games, but the number of defensive actions has gone up, right? Like
Yeah,
last season it was about 24 a game, and they were 13th in La Liga, and this season obviously only two games, but they're third, and they're at over 27
yeah.
defensive
I will say
actions.
a lot of that is probably like counter press and rest defense because the one thing with the way they're playing is like they have a really good counter pressing and rest defense structure. And I'm sure the fans will love to hear this. It's
Yeah,
so enjoyable to watch.
I go
Like they
to
have a
games and
great.
I cheer for the
Exactly.
rest defense.
When you lose the ball, that's when you start cheering because that's when the rest
Yeah,
of us kicks
because
in.
I shout, "Here
Uh,
we go, structure! Here we go."
Actually, as an Arsenal fan, that's actually probably likely.
It's honestly it's
But,
honestly the best that you can hope for sometimes. That you're like, don't worry, guys, our structure was actually fine.
but yeah, like I think that, and also the very little we've seen in the out of possession stuff, it's felt like they are going to have some kind of a measured press
Mm.
where it's more of like a mid press where they like let the opponents get past Mbappe and then see what they can do with the midfielders, and Vinny whenever he feels like pressing, because he did feel like pressing when he came on and got a
Yeah,
goal
man.
out of
And I
it.
mean, like that second goal, like that's the blueprint, right? Where you're
Yeah,
like high turnover because Vinny like saw a sloppy touch and chased somebody down, and goal
goal.
comes instantaneously. I mean, I guess yes, I'm really intrigued to see them play a better side for obvious reasons. I think the Goulet midfield experiment will be interesting to see against a better side, especially because like I look at games like this and I think I see load carrying beams here, which will
Exactly,
be
exactly.
interesting. Like like you look at that midfield and you see like Chouameni had like 8 tackles and interceptions in this game, and Howson and Carvajal also had a lot. And you think, okay, this is against a bad side, a side we expect to be bad this season. Um, what happens against a better side? Do we get a more effect? Will we have a more effective press by then, or are we still basically going to say, well, we'll swap one of these guys out for Camavinga, and like Camavinga will do it, or we'll play Bellingham instead of Goulet and hope that he'll, is there something like that where we're going to get more defense, or is the plan always going to be, well, we've signed really good defensive players and the defensive players will do defensive stuff and all the other guys will do other stuff. Like Chabi's not going to want that. But yeah, I just look at this game and I'm like, man, even against a weak side, I see Howson having like 4 defensive actions and Carvajal having 5. And I think it's quite a lot of work for your actual defenders to be doing. And they're going to get beaten sometimes. So yeah, I'm intrigued to see whether those stress points turn into stress fractures, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair. And also just on Bellingham, he might actually offer that kind of box presence that they're lacking
Yeah.
in this
Mm.
system. Because like again, it's just low blocks, but like their eights have been super high quite often, right? They basically even have a front five, like a flat front five, in many cases with the ball. So when Mbappe drifts out, like he's someone who can actually, and they did in this game have a couple of like good chances with Rodrigo cutting in and crossing at the far post, but no one was there, or Mastantuono was too late to get there. But
Mhm.
like if there's someone like Bellingham, or even on the odd occasion if like Gonzalo Garcia is starting there, or maybe even Endrick, you might get something out of those chances as well against these kinds of teams. So yeah, I think it's interesting to see how they go about this. But as you say, more interesting to see what they do against stronger teams, how well the structure holds up, and how much control they can establish. And yeah, I think if they can kind of get a good amount of control in those games, I wouldn't mind their chances at all in the title race, because
Mm.
yeah, I mean Barca are going to do the same stuff again. We know that.
Well, and potentially with a year like, look, this is not to go after him, but potentially a year of every single person on planet Earth praising him and learning his name might not have been good for Lamine Yamal's shot selection. It turns out he's shooting from the most insane positions you've ever seen in your life. Which like if you're him, then you get a little bit more leeway there, but we will see. Okay, and Atleti starting the season badly. Um,
Amazingly. Look,
yeah,
Diego Simeone, I'm sorry, but like you're on fraud watch now, man. I've had
yeah.
enough.
I mean,
You're on fraud
everybody's on fraud watch until we take them off fraud watch. Like the default position is you're on fraud watch, and you can graduate to like a grudging admiration, I guess, like, or neutrality. All right. I think that kind of brings us to a close for this week's episode. I'm glad that we were finally able to get out of the Premier League at the end there, Neil, because
Amazing.
that is really where you live and breathe. Where can people find your updates on global football? Because it is amazing that I'll be on Twitter and I'm like, oh, it is interesting to know like what's going on in like the African Women's Champions League or something. Like genuinely, it's kind of cool that I'm like, Neel is my go-to man.
Yeah, you can head over to @Neel on Blue Sky or Twitter. I think the last thing I did on the weekend was the Icelandic Cup final, and
Man,
that was good stuff. Good entertainment. I don't know what's next, but we'll see.
if you want to see people play against their cousins to try and win a trophy, then check out the Icelandic
In a
Cup.
random, yeah, a completely random island, there's probably 500 people on there at best on a good day, and a football pitch.
Well, thank you for being here. And thank you to everybody at home who's been listening and watching. Please do subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're new here, and make sure that you leave us a 5-star review if you listen to us on your favorite podcast app. We will be back later in the week covering all the transfer news as we approach the deadline. Thank you for your support, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.